Before we get started, don't forget to check out my new fairy fantasy novel, The Ghosts of Nothing. It's about a girl from a haunted town that turns out to have a bigger fairy problem than a ghost problem. It's available on Amazon and in other stores now. There are fairies on the farm. This happened to me very recently and is the second encounter I've ever had, the last one being about 36 years ago. I should preface this with the fact that I come from a proud Irish ancestry, and so all my family have had a strong connection and equally strong belief in the little people. In fact, my uncle featured in a TV documentary about fairy encounters, relaying one of his own encounters. His and my own previous encounter have also featured on this channel before, so I'm really excited to relay this recent encounter here. Truth be told, I'm kind of still reeling from the events that follow, lurching somewhere between awestruck, dumb disbelief, and more than a little bit of apprehensiveness. It was a cold, early morning, and I was out with my two dogs walking the fields and woods I am fortunate enough to live by. It was very, very early in the morning. A mist hung across the newly plowed fields and amongst the trees of the woods. If you could paint a picture of early autumn in Kent, then this is as close as you could get. Chill, misty, and a slight rust on the summer foliage. We had just finished the broad circuit of the field, and my gaze hound had had a lovely time diving in and out of the hedgerows, sending a poor pheasant clattering into the chill morning sky. And my Jack Russell, nowhere near as fast as her big sister, contented herself with snuffling investigations of small wildlife runs and molehills. We headed down the steep bank into the woods, which were still quite dark, but alive with the sound of birds. I continued up a steep incline to the top of another bank. There ahead was an old fallen tree that we often passed, an old giant that had become a home to many squirrels. However, on this occasion, there were no squirrels. There was a small, very skinny looking character wearing what looked like a cloak of autumnal leaves, a tattered tunic, and dark brown leggings, and a strange looking cloth wrappings on its feet. He seemed to be searching for something under the fallen tree and was muttering to himself. His voice sounded like twigs snapping. It could have only been a matter of seconds between me clapping eyes on the little creature when my two dogs came plunging over the brow of the bank. It was the dog's arrival that alerted the little man, who shot up and turned around, allowing me a glimpse of his face. It was definitely humanoid, but he had a long nose, a long, pointy philtrum, almost beak-like, and a small chin. If you looked at it in profile, it would look like an isosceles triangle. It had, I recall, leaves woven into its hair, which appeared green and shoulder length. I think, but cannot be sure, he also had braids in front of his ears, which were also long and pointed. He appeared to have an earring in one ear, which looked like it was made of a snail shell or something similar. I swear he gave a little croaking yelp and then dived, yes, dived, into a gap under the tree trunk, vanishing completely. The dogs had spotted him and both stopped dead, staring and growling in the direction he had been. Nothing seemed to move for ages, which of course wasn't the case. Just as quickly as the dogs stop, They both ran to the spot that he had vanished and started snuffling, blowing, and whimpering as they frantically sniffed about the place. The creature had been stooping. My instinct was to run, as I did the last time I encountered one of the little people. Being older, but not necessarily wiser, I went instead to look at the place he had been. There was nothing. Or should that be nobody there? But I distinctly felt a tingling energy. The only way I can describe it is like tinnitus, but in the legs, not the ears. My two dogs had decided that whatever was there wasn't exciting anymore, and both carried on their business, sniffling, snuffling, and exploring the other smells of the forest. I carried on home, troubled, excited, and blessed. Definitely blessed, but tempered with a sense of unease and apprehension. With Samhain on its way, I suppose I had encountered one of the Seelie Fae, getting ready to leave his fairy fort and travel to Tir na Nog, leaving the forest and countryside to the dominion of the crone and unseelie Fae for winter. I returned the day after and left a little offering of some whiskey and a small piece of cake, which I hoped would fortify the little fellow for his trip away. I hoped he would return at Beltane. Oh, as a P.S., the whiskey and cake had both gone when I returned the next morning. I'd used a thimble from one of my daughter's old playsets for the whiskey, which I should also add I found carefully propped up and overturned on top of a branch just off the pathway. Probably placed there by another person walking their dog, imagining a child lost it. Maybe. Although I like to imagine the little fellow had enjoyed the tot and placed the thimble there for me to reclaim, and maybe wove a little fairy magic to hide it from anyone else. There you have it, my second fairy sighting. I do consider myself truly blessed, doubly so if you deem my encounter worthy of sharing with you all. Blessed be, and have a happy Samhain, and remember to leave a treat out for the Fae who are traveling to and from our realm on Samhain night. I would like to convey my recent experience that began in October 2019, around Halloween, and lasted in an extreme physical way for 12 months until the following Halloween. I live in Western Australia. As a kid, I believed in fairies. I had a few experiences that convinced me that they were more than just stories. The most vivid happened when I was actually a teenager. I was 17. I was in my parents' garden watering the flowers on a hot summer day when I saw this woman who I knew immediately wasn't a human. She was as tall as an adult human, though, appearing as a typical, almost Tolkien elf with long flowing blonde hair and a white, almost toga-like gown. This was long before Tolkien made it to the screen, though, so I didn't have any preconceived notions. I was born in 1962. Anyway, she was sort of hugging one of the bushes in the garden. I looked at her, and she looked at me, and then she was gone. I wasn't the only one in my family who had seen fairies. I remember my father telling me that once, when he was a child attending church, he had become transfixed throughout the service by a gnome, making his way under the pews and between people's feet, as if using a jungle gym. He was the only one who could see the gnome as far as he was aware. So, I don't know, maybe there's some fairy sight that runs in the family? So, on to my recent experience. It was October 2019, and I hadn't thought about or acknowledged the existence of fairies in a very long time. But for whatever reason, maybe because Halloween was coming up, I decided on that day to leave an offering for the good neighbors at the foot of an oak tree at the end of my property of cakes and milk. I didn't think much of it afterwards, and then in the coming days, strange things started to happen to me. It started late one night with this rhythmic banging sound on the front verge. It was as if someone was drumming on a council rubbish bin. I looked outside, but I didn't see anyone there. I couldn't tell where the banging had come from, but I shrugged it off. Then it happened again the following night, and again the night after, and then again the night after that. This continued almost every night for several weeks. I went out several times in the middle of the night to investigate, but there was never anyone to be seen. I never placed any paranormal significance to these events. I had lived in this fabulous old house for 10 years, peacefully, without any problems, supernatural or otherwise. So I just didn't assume right away that this could be some kind of haunting. But then, over the course of these few weeks, the banging noise seemed to get worse and to be moving closer to the front of my house. Until one night, the banging was on my front veranda, which is wooden. And then the next night, I was woken by an extremely loud banging on the French doors of my bedroom that led to the veranda. This is where things began to be really frightening. The following night, I was jolted awake by the feeling of someone pulling the lower part of my body off the bed. I was able to yell out the words, "Stop! No!" And I just felt that whatever was assailing me had immediately left the room through the closed French doors. But then, out on the veranda, whatever it was began loudly and rhythmically banging on the veranda floor. After this event, every night, continuously throughout the night, I was physically poked and jolted awake every time I fell asleep, for nights on end, until I finally fled to my father's house. This was effective and I was able to get some sleep, but eventually I had to return home and all the same things started happening again. The second time I fled to my father's house, I think the entity followed me because all of the same things were happening. The jolting, the poking, the banging in the middle of the night. Eventually, I just returned home because it seemingly didn't matter where I was. I was also having to take my cat with me back and forth, and the poor thing was being terrorized as well. Apart from being physically poked and shaken, this thing would also jump on the bed at times or shake the bed, which is large and solid. The cat would freak out as well and jump off the bed and run and hide. On one occasion, I heard extremely loud noises around my ceiling, creaking and popping sounds or pinging noises along with banging on my tin roof incessantly. I also felt like I was being constantly touched by spirit hands, especially my lower legs throughout the day, even whilst driving, which I do often as I'm a community nurse. Once I experienced loud banging on my nursing car when I was parked at my clinic. And at the height of the activity, I had an Aboriginal person in my clinic for wound care, and this loud rapping occurred on the clinic door. There was no one there, and it was impossible for anyone to disappear down the hallway and out the door in the moment it took us to check who was out there. Of course, I had an idea what it was, and the Aboriginal man also knew, as he immediately said, "That was a spirit." After this had gone on for several months, I eventually asked my neighbor if he'd heard any strange noises around the area, especially at night. And he confirmed that he had heard some loud rhythmic banging noises back when this first started on the verge. But he was mystified as to their cause. So I knew for certain it wasn't just me. I wasn't imagining things. I tried many things to clear the energy in my house without success. Many sagings with only minimal effectiveness. I paid a prominent medium to come to my house, and he was able to confirm that I had a male entity in my house, but it would not communicate with him. I had a paranormal investigative team come and spend a night in my house, and they recorded some voice data and orbs on film and a lot of movement as their sensors were set off continuously. But this didn't help. I even asked the local Catholic priest to cleanse my house, even though I'm not even Catholic. But I was becoming desperate. This actually made matters worse, not better. I was starting to get very, very desperate at this point. I remembered back to a conversation I had with one of the paranormal investigators. She mentioned something offhandedly that she had heard of women that were going through menopause reporting poltergeist activity around that time, and she suggested I research it a little. I did research the topic and found several women on YouTube who had reported some very similar experiences to what I was going through. Loud noises, furniture moving around, that kind of thing during the period when they were going through menopause. I wondered if there could be a connection. It was a major transition in life, and it sort of made sense that there could be some energy or entity attracted to that. And I had been suffering tremendously exaggerated hot flushes, worse than most women. I certainly felt like I was giving off massive amounts of uncontrolled energy with every hot flush I experienced. So, from that moment, I sought hormone replacement therapy as a remedy, which might sound weird, but it gradually began to help. I started ignoring all the phenomena completely, and these two approaches together eventually worked. But it took 12 months for things to return to normal. It wasn't until the following Halloween that I could finally breathe a sigh of relief and feel like my life was mine again. I also never went back to the oak tree in my yard with another offering for the good neighbors. I figure best leave well enough alone and not disturb what doesn't want to be disturbed. I absolutely love your channel and the ambience you magically create with the stories you tell. I've had a few true experiences with what I deem maybe possible nature spirits, fairies, and I thought I would offer one of them for your consideration in case you want to use it. This happened in San Diego, California. It was Halloween night 2020. It was near midnight and the moon hung low in the sky, full and luminous. I stepped on my balcony to admire it when I noticed the light from it created what looked like magical fairy lights twinkling on the palm tree next to my balcony. It brought back a childhood memory of a greeting I used to use to call forth the fae from a book I read about fairies. I think it was a Wiccan book. So, without a thought, I recited, I welcome the fairies of the north, south, east, and west into my home and my life. In the name of the goddess, so mote it be. Blessed be. I also mused aloud how lovely it would be to be able to leave my body and fly under the light of this moon. That night, I found I could not sleep, but turned off the light and tried to settle in anyway. As I lay there, I heard the sound of wings fluttering in my room, and then right next to my head. It wasn't the sound of fluttering from a bird's wing, but rather the kind of sound you hear from a dragonfly's wing, but a very, very large dragonfly. I jumped up to turn on the lights and search the room to see what could be creating this noise, but I couldn't find anything at all. I turned off the lights and tried to settle in again. But again, I heard the wings right next to my head. I could neither see what was making the sound in the dark, nor when I turned the lights on again. So I don't know what it was. But I can't help but wonder if my greeting to call the Fae really did summon something that night, and if what I summoned was trying to help me fly under the light of that full moon. When I was still in high school, my friend and I witnessed something that neither of us will ever forget. We were at her house, which was near the woods. It was 2 days before Halloween. It was at night. We were having a sleepover. My friend's house had this enclosed porch with windows all around from end to end that has a view of the woods. There were comfy garden furniture in there and blankets and wet autumn leaves stuck to the outside glass. It was really cozy in there, if a bit cool. So we were sitting in there sipping hot cocoa and chatting about teenagery things when my friend's mother came out to check on us. But instead of saying anything to us, she stopped dead in the doorway and stared out through the window toward the woods. She looked frightened, and I immediately got nervous and asked her what was wrong. Still looking kind of stunned, she pointed through the glass. My friend and I looked in the direction her mother was pointing, to the right, where this small grove of trees had grown up like an island in front of the forest. There was something out there. It seemed to be taking shape in the moonlight. All three of us saw it. At first, it looked like a massive stag. But as I continued to stare at it, I started to realize that it wasn't a stag, but a tall, broad shouldered man with antlers on his head. I stood up. I had this urge to open the porch door and walk over there to see if what I thought I was seeing was what I was actually seeing. Maybe this wasn't the smartest thing to do, but I just felt strongly at that moment that I had to know. My friend's mother grabbed my arm before I could go outside and said no, which was probably a good thing in retrospect. When I looked back toward the grove, the stag or antler man or whatever I saw was gone. At this time, I had an interest in Celtic mythology, and after doing some reading, I'm pretty sure that what I saw that day was related in some way to the wild hunt, which I know is out and about at this time of year. I think whoever was out there might have been the leader of the wild hunt. That's my feeling, anyway. When discussing what happened, my friend said she saw a stag, but my friend's mother wouldn't say what she saw. She only said that if I had gone out there like I had wanted to, I might have never been seen again. I don't know if she was right, but I guess I'm glad I didn't test fate or the Fae. Thanks for watching, and thanks to everyone who shared their stories for this one. I have a quick announcement. My fairy fantasy novel, The Ghosts of Nothing, which in its electronic version has so far only been available on Kindle, is now going to be available in other stores like Kobo, Barnes and Noble, Google Play, etc. I'll be announcing each one as each becomes available here on the channel and on my Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter feeds. So follow me on those to keep up with that. This book is perfect for Halloween if you haven't read it yet. In fact, part of the story takes place at Halloween. There's a haunted town, a persecuted family, a girl with a strange and mysterious connection to fairies. There's a mystery, there's action, there's adventure, a beautiful and frightening fairy world based on fairy mythology and a really unique magic system. The book has been getting really wonderful reviews, so if you haven't picked up your copy yet, what are you waiting for? I'd really like to know. For those who have read the book, thank you so much. I'm thrilled about all of the amazing reviews, and I'm definitely working on book 2, so stay tuned. In the meantime, there's a universal book link in the description with all the places you can pick up a copy if you haven't yet. And I'm going to be continuously updating that book link as more places to buy become available. There will be an audio version coming out probably sometime very soon. Sadly, I won't be narrating this version of the audiobook because of all sorts of reasons right now, but the actor who will be narrating the book is really wonderful, has a really delightful voice. So I really hope that you guys will give the voice a chance. You will have a chance to listen and sample the voice before you purchase, so you can sort of get an idea if it's the type of voice that you'd be happy to hear a whole novel from. And hopefully, I think you will, because his voice is great. If you have a story to share, you can check out my website at scaryfairygodmother.com, link in the description. It has a spot where you can submit your stories, comments, questions, or suggestions. You can also sign up for my mailing list there, Fairy Lights. Extra special thanks, as always, goes out to all my supporters on Patreon and anyone who has joined the channel, made a one-time donation through PayPal or Ko-fi, or purchased a copy of my book. I really appreciate you guys so, so much and the support you are giving this work. If you like this content and would like to support it, please check out my Patreon page and the other support options in the description below. The stories in this video came courtesy of subscribers, so thank you so much to everyone who submitted their story. These stories were edited for dramatic and narration reasons. Please leave a comment below, like, share, and subscribe if you're new. It really helps the channel when you do that. And hit the bell to receive notifications of new videos. And don't forget to sign up for my mailing list, Fairy Lights. Link in the description. And until next time, this has been a visit from your scary fairy godmother.